Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Brigadier Alison Cray, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lieutenant Colonel Selina Rowland. Today we commemorate the centenary of the 1919 Royal Henley Peace Regatta. English rowing clubs organised the regatta after the cessation of First World War hostilities for amateur oarsmen of the Allied forces, including Australia, New Zealand, Canada, France, the USA and the United Kingdom. The idea behind the competition was to help heal wounds and hasten the return to normality for the troops returning from the First World War. Australia's participation was successful as the Australian Imperial Force No. 1 crew won the King's Cup. The Cup was presented to the winning Australian team by King George V, and the King's Cup is now awarded annually to the fastest state crew in Australia. This year, the military eights that competed at the 1919 regatta will once again compete against each other at the 2019 Henley Royal Regatta. And this year will include female military athletes as well as competitors from Germany and the Netherlands. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr Ian Robson, Chief Executive Officer of Rowing Australia, the athletes of the 2019 Australian rowing team, and this year's Australian Defence Force King's Cup team. We welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed on the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant Charles Murray Storrer. Charles Storrer was born in Geelong on the 10th of November 1894 to Henry and Margaret Storrer. Commonly known by his middle name of Murray, he attended Geelong College before going on to work as a clerk for Dalgety and Company. Storrer had a keen interest in the military, having served in the Mounted Cadets and the 29th Light Horse. He enlisted in the 1st Australian Imperial Force in August 1914 and was assigned to the newly raised 4th Light Horse Regiment as a sergeant. Storrer was a well-known member of Barwon Rowing Club, one of the oldest sporting clubs in Victoria. Two of his brothers also rowed for Barwon, and his father, who had been treasurer of the club since 1909, would go on to be president after the war. Charles joined the club in 1910 and rowed 3-seat in the winning maiden 8 in the Ballarat Regatta of 1914. Before leaving Australia in late October, he rowed with fellow members William Allen and Rolf Barnfather in the Light Horse winning 8 in an interregimental regatta on the Yarra River. After arriving at training camps in Egypt, he again rowed in a winning 8 with Rolf Barnfather at an army regatta. While the 4th Light Horse Regiment had been formed as the Divisional Cavalry Regiment for the 1st Division, when the division departed to take part in the Gallipoli campaign, the Light Horse were left behind. Because of the terrain, it was believed that mounted troops would not be needed. However, casualties on the peninsula proved to be so severe that Light Horse were sent without their horses as infantry reinforcements. Storer's regiment landed at Anzac Cove in late May 1915 and was broken up to provide reinforcements for infantry battalions around the beachhead. On the 1st of June, Storrer Squadron was attached to the 4th Battalion. 4 days later, it supported an attack on German officers' trenches. Ottoman forces began pouring shrapnel into the trenches from 5 a.m. A few hours into the assault, Storrer was having breakfast with his cousin, Lieutenant Murray Bircher, and Rolf Barnfather, his old mate from Barwon, when a high explosive shell burst overhead. A piece of shrapnel struck Storrer on the head, and he lost consciousness instantly. No one knew that he was hit for some time, as he just didn't move. Just sat there with a piece of biscuit in his hand. He died some hours later without gaining consciousness and was buried on the beach that day. A number of his Barwon friends attended his burial, including Leopold Hager, a bugler with the 8th Battalion, who played the last post for him. After the war, his remains were reinterred in Beach Cemetery at the southern point of Anzac Cove. Sadly, the tragedy of loss was not over for the Storrer family. Charles's brother, Captain Henry Haig Storrer, of 3rd Squadron, Australian Flying Corps, was killed in France in December 1917, when his plane crashed into the brick wall of the Bayeux Cemetery as he took off on an artillery patrol. Today, Charles and Henry Storrer and their cousin, Sister Jessie Pringle Storrer, who trained as a nurse at Geelong Hospital before enlisting in the Australian Army Nursing Service and serving in India, Rangoon, Burma, and West Bengal, are remembered through the naming of Storrer Street in East Geelong. Charles Storer's name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my right. Amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant Charles Murray Storrer, who gave his life for us. For our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.